My name's Sarah, I'm 28, and I never thought the person I trusted most, my own dad, would try to take everything my mom left me. It all happened inside a bank, in broad daylight, with papers sliding across the desk and a pen pushed into my hand. I thought I was signing for security, but instead, I almost signed my future away. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more family drama, revenge, and emotional courage stories. The first time I walked into that bank, I thought it would be a routine meeting. Just a few signatures, a quiet acknowledgement of what my mom had left behind, and maybe, just maybe, a small sigh of relief that I'd finally have something of my own. But nothing about that day was ordinary. I remember the way the glass doors felt heavy as I pushed them open. The cool air conditioning hit my skin, but instead of calming me, it sent a shiver down my back. My dad walked beside me, his steps sharp and steady, almost like he owned the place. I didn't notice it at first, but later, I realized how much that walk said about his intentions. The banker, a middle-aged man in a navy suit, greeted us with a polite smile. "Good morning, Mr. Harris. Miss Harris." His voice was warm, but professional, the kind of tone you'd expect from someone who'd seen 100 families like ours walk in and out every week. I gave a small nod, trying to smile back, though my stomach already felt uneasy. I hadn't been able to sleep much the night before. Losing my mom was still a wound that hadn't even begun to heal, and now here I was, dealing with paperwork that felt both too small and too huge all at once. We followed the banker into a side office. The blinds were half drawn, letting in streaks of sunlight that cut across the desk. A faint smell of coffee lingered in the air, mixed with the scent of freshly printed paper. I sat down slowly, clutching my purse tighter than I realized, while Dad slid into the chair beside me with a kind of confidence that made it clear he thought he was in charge. The banker began setting documents on the desk. "This is regarding the insurance payout from your mother's policy," he explained, neatly arranging the forms. His words were gentle, almost respectful, as if he knew the subject itself was still painful. For a moment, I let myself think about Mom. She wasn't wealthy, not by any means, but she had always been careful. She worked long hours, saved every extra dollar, and told me over and over that she wanted me to have a cushion in life, something she never had. That policy wasn't much, but to me, it meant stability. It meant a chance to pay off my student loans, maybe even fix the old car I drove every day. I leaned forward to get a better look at the forms. That's when I noticed Dad's hand. His fingers pressed down firmly on the stack of papers, holding them in place almost possessively. He glanced at me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Go ahead, Sarah," he said softly. "It's just routine. Sign here, and we'll take care of everything." The way he said we made me pause. My mother had told me, very clearly, that the policy was in my name. It was supposed to go directly to me. But here he was, speaking as if he had equal rights to it. I picked up the pen the banker had set down, my hand hovering just above the signature line. My eyes scanned the words on the page, and the more I read, the colder I felt. The form wasn't about securing funds for me. It was transferring them out of my name and into his. I froze. My throat tightened, and my chest felt heavy, like I couldn't draw in a full breath. "Dad," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Why is my name being replaced here?" He didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned closer, his voice calm but edged with authority. "Don't worry about the details. It's safer this way. You're young, you don't know how to manage money yet. I'll handle it for you." The words stung. They weren't new. I had grown up hearing variations of them all my life. "You don't know what you're doing. You can't be trusted. Leave it to me." But here, in this sterile little bank office, with my mother's hard work reduced to a few pieces of paper, they cut deeper than ever. The banker looked at me briefly, then back at my dad, his expression carefully neutral. But something in his eyes told me he noticed my hesitation. I tried to clear my throat. "Maybe I should take these home first. Read them over." Dad's jaw tightened, though he kept the smile plastered on his face. "No, Sarah. We're doing this today. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." My fingers trembled as I set the pen back down. I glanced at the banker, wishing he could somehow read the panic in my eyes. Then I looked back at my dad, the man who had raised me, the man I was supposed to trust. But all I saw was someone willing to strip me of the last thing Mom had given me. Memories flashed quickly, him telling me I owed him for every meal, every ride, every dollar he had ever spent on me. Him reminding me that I wouldn't be anywhere without him. And now, this was his final proof. Even after Mom was gone, he still controlled everything. The room felt smaller by the second. The air felt too thick to breathe. I shifted in my chair, wishing for some excuse to leave, some way to make this all stop. Then, almost instinctively, I tightened my grip on my purse. Inside it, tucked between old receipts and gum wrappers, was a small notepad. My heart thudded at the thought. I didn't have a plan, not yet, but a strange spark of defiance flickered to life. I took another deep breath, steadying myself. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for certain: this wasn't just about money. This was about control. And for the first time in my life, I felt the beginnings of a shift. That day in the bank, staring down at those papers, I realized something that would change everything. My dad wasn't here to protect me. He was here to take from me. And if I wanted to hold on to what little I had left, I would have to find a way to fight back, quietly, carefully, and without him ever seeing it coming. His smile didn't leave his face, not even for a second, but the more I looked at it, the more it felt like a mask. There was nothing soft or reassuring in it. It was stretched too wide, held too long, and his eyes told a different story altogether. He leaned back in his chair, one arm draped casually over the side, like he owned the room. "Sarah," he said slowly, "I'm only doing what's best for you. You can't see it now, but you will." His voice was calm, but I caught the flicker of impatience in the way his fingers tapped against the wood of the banker's desk. A small, steady rhythm, tap, 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 that betrayed how much he wanted me to just give in. I folded my hands in my lap, squeezing them tight. "It doesn't feel like that," I whispered. The banker shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses, pretending to review the papers again, but I could tell he was listening. His eyes darted from my dad to me and back again. He was trying to stay neutral, but even he seemed to sense the tension building between us. Dad's smile widened. "You don't trust me?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. The question wasn't innocent. It was a test. I knew that look in his eyes. He wasn't asking for reassurance. He wanted obedience. He wanted me to nod and say, "Of course I trust you, Dad." That was the script I'd followed for years, the one that kept the peace at home. But this time, my silence stretched. Something shifted in his face. The smile stayed, but it grew tighter, almost forced, as if he was holding it in place with sheer will. His jaw flexed, just once, before he caught himself. "Sarah," he said, more firmly now, "your mother didn't understand money. She worked hard, yes, but she wasn't practical. She made decisions based on emotions. I'm not like that. I know how to handle these things. If you just sign, we can avoid problems later." My chest tightened. Hearing him dismiss Mom like that made my stomach turn. She had sacrificed everything, skipped vacations, second-hand clothes, and late-night shifts, all for me. She wasn't perfect, but she was careful. She had thought about my future in ways Dad never had. Still, his words slid across the table like a trap. I knew how good he was with persuasion. Growing up, I'd watched him charm neighbors, sweet-talk co-workers, and bend arguments until people gave in just to stop the pressure. He was doing it now, using that same smile, that same calm tone, but beneath it, there was weight. The banker finally spoke. "Miss Harris," he said cautiously, "you don't have to make a decision right this moment if you're not comfortable." Dad's head snapped toward him. The smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Then he chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I appreciate your concern, but this is just family business. Isn't that right, Sarah?" The way he said my name made my skin prickle. It wasn't a question. It was an order wrapped in honey. I swallowed hard. "I'd like to read everything before I sign," I said quietly, forcing the words out. His fingers stopped tapping. His hand curled slightly against the desk, knuckles whitening, though his face still wore that maddening smile. "Sarah," he said again, slower this time, "don't embarrass me here. You're making this harder than it needs to be." The word embarrass hit me like a slap. That was his favorite weapon, shame. He knew how much I hated being the cause of conflict, how often I'd back down just to keep peace. But this time, instead of shrinking, I met his eyes. For the first time in years, I didn't look away. That's when I noticed the crack in his expression. His smile didn't change, but his eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, narrowed ever so slightly. A flicker of frustration passed over his face, quick as lightning, but I saw it. The banker pretended to type something into his computer, but I could feel the air thick with unspoken words. Dad leaned closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "Don't you dare make me look weak in front of him," he hissed, though his lips were still curved upward. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. Out loud, for the room to hear, he added cheerfully, "She's just a little nervous, that's all. First big responsibility, right?" He laughed lightly, but the sound was thin, strained. I felt a rush of heat in my face. Every muscle in my body told me to back down, to give him what he wanted. But then another memory pushed through, the last conversation I'd had with Mom in the hospital. Her voice weak but steady as she told me, "Don't let anyone take what's yours, Sarah. Not even your father." I shifted in my seat, straightening my back. "I still want to read it first," I said firmly this time, louder, so the banker could hear. Dad's smile froze. His hand moved to the papers, his fingers gripping the edge like he might tear them in half. Then, slowly, he released them and forced another laugh. "Of course," he said smoothly, though the tension in his jaw betrayed him. "Of course, sweetheart. Take your time." But his smile didn't soften. It tightened. It became something else entirely, sharp, rigid, almost dangerous. The kind of smile that said, "This isn't over." And I knew it wasn't. The banker, sensing the unspoken battle, excused himself politely. "I'll give you a few minutes," he said, slipping out of the office. The door clicked shut, and suddenly it was just me and Dad in that small room. His smile vanished the second we were alone. "You're making a mistake," he said flatly, his voice low and hard now. "Do you really think you can manage this money? Do you even understand what's at stake? You'll waste it. You'll regret this." I clutched the edge of my chair, grounding myself. "I don't want to regret trusting the wrong person," I said, surprising even myself with the steadiness in my voice. For a moment, his eyes searched mine, sharp and unrelenting. Then he leaned back, pulling that smile back onto his face like a mask he couldn't afford to take off. "You'll come around," he said finally, almost like a promise. But behind that smile, behind the calmness he projected, I saw it clearly now, the cracks, the pressure, the fear of losing control. And for the first time in my life, I realized he needed my signature more than I needed his approval. The moment the banker's office door shut behind him, the air thickened. My father's smile was gone, replaced by the sharp, cold look I'd seen too many times growing up. It was the expression that silenced me as a child, that made me second-guess every word. But now, sitting across from him at that heavy wooden desk, I felt something different rising in me, not fear, but a quiet determination. Still, I knew I couldn't face him head-on. Not here. Not with the papers between us and the weight of his voice pressing on me like a storm. I needed another way out. A silent way. The banker's pen lay near my elbow. Black ink, smooth grip, the kind you use without thinking. My father was watching my face so closely, I knew he'd notice if I hesitated too long. So I reached for the pen, sliding the papers closer like I was finally giving in. His lips curved upward again, smug, certain. But instead of signing, I lowered the pen and pressed it to the side of the agreement, right near the margin where his eyes wouldn't linger. My hand shook slightly as I wrote a few quick words. "Don't let me sign. Help me." It was messy, rushed, but readable. I angled the paper so that my arm covered most of it, then pushed the sheet back as though I'd finished reviewing it. His eyes narrowed. "That was fast," he said, his voice suspicious but still playing polite. I forced a weak smile. "I've seen enough." The silence between us stretched until the door opened again. The banker stepped back inside, balancing a folder in his hand. My father straightened immediately, his friendly mask snapping back into place. "All set," he said cheerfully, sliding the papers forward. "She's ready." The banker glanced at me. Just for a second. His brow furrowed, barely visible, but I caught it. He'd seen the note. My heart raced so hard I thought it might give me away. I folded my hands in my lap again, holding them still. I couldn't say anything, not without my father twisting it, turning me into the problem. I had lived long enough under his shadow to know how quickly he could spin a story. The banker didn't move right away. He tapped the papers lightly against the desk, aligning them as if straightening edges. His eyes flicked back to me once more, a question lingering in them. I swallowed hard and gave the smallest nod I could manage. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. My father didn't notice. He was too busy filling the silence with his confident tone. "You know, she's always been bright. I've taught her a lot about responsibility. This is just the next step." The banker nodded politely, but his hands didn't open the folder. Instead, he said, "Why don't I step out and make a copy for her records first? That way she can take something home to review." My father's smile stiffened. "That's unnecessary. I'll explain it to her." But the banker was already standing. "It's policy," he said smoothly. "I'll be right back." He gathered the papers, including the one with my shaky handwriting. My pulse thundered in my ears as I watched the door close behind him again. My father let out a sharp breath, his smile cracking into something darker. "You're dragging this out, Sarah," he said, his voice low and edged. "You think stalling will change the outcome? It won't." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Every second the banker held those papers was another second of safety, a small crack in my father's control. The minutes stretched, heavy and tense. My father leaned closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "You're mine to protect, whether you like it or not. You're too young to understand what's best. When you look back years from now, you'll thank me." His words crawled under my skin, mixing guilt with fury. For a moment, I almost believed him, almost slipped back into that familiar place where his voice was louder than my own. But then the door clicked open again, and the banker returned. He didn't sit down right away. He placed the papers carefully on the desk, his expression calm, but I caught the faintest tension in his eyes. He knew. He was choosing his next move carefully. "Actually," the banker said, sliding the agreement toward me, "I think it's best we pause here. Sarah deserves time to go over everything without pressure." My father's smile faltered. "Pressure," he repeated, chuckling dryly. "There's no pressure. She trusts me." The banker's gaze shifted, landing on me with a weight that felt both terrifying and relieving. He wasn't saying it out loud, not yet, but he was giving me the chance to speak. For the first time in years, I let myself breathe. My throat felt tight, but I managed to whisper, "I need time." The room went still. My father turned to me, his eyes sharp, his smile gone. "Sarah," he said, his tone low and dangerous, "don't play games." But the banker didn't hand the papers back to him. Instead, he tucked them into his folder, standing again. "Then that's final. We'll schedule another meeting when you're ready." My father's chair scraped against the floor as he stood abruptly. His voice dropped to a controlled murmur, but I could hear the rage simmering beneath. "You're making a scene. Don't forget who takes care of you." I felt my body tense, my hands trembling in my lap. But for once, I didn't shrink. I lifted my chin just enough to meet his stare. "I can take care of myself." The words hung in the air, fragile and trembling but real. My father's eyes blazed, but before he could respond, the banker stepped between us slightly, his calm professionalism returning. "We'll reconvene," he said firmly, directing the conversation away from the confrontation. I knew this wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. But in that small office, surrounded by papers and silence, I had sent my cry for help, and someone had finally heard it. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't entirely alone. The ride home was silent, yet it roared in my ears louder than any storm. My father's hands gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles pale against the leather. He didn't speak, not even once, and I didn't dare fill the silence. Every bump in the road felt like a warning, every red light stretched too long. The memory of the banker's eyes, steady and knowing, replayed in my mind like a lifeline. When we finally pulled into the driveway, he killed the engine but didn't move. His jaw was locked tight, that same smile from earlier nowhere to be found. The air inside the car was suffocating. "You embarrassed me today," he said at last, his voice low and controlled, like a calm surface hiding deep currents. I pressed my palms together in my lap, my throat dry. "I didn't mean to." "Yes, you did," he snapped, turning to face me fully. His eyes burned with the same sharpness I remembered from childhood, the kind that left no room for defense. "That banker thinks I can't even handle my own family. Do you understand what you've done?" I wanted to shrink back, to disappear into the seat, but something inside me held firm. The image of my mother, frail in her hospital bed, her hand squeezing mine as she whispered not to let anyone take what was mine, flashed in my mind. I forced myself to breathe slowly before answering. "I only asked for time. That's all." His laugh was bitter, harsh. "Time? You don't need time. You need guidance. Without me, you'd lose everything." The words landed heavy, but this time they didn't sink me. Instead, they sparked something, an anger I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. "Maybe I don't want everything if it means losing myself," I said, my voice shaking but clear. For a moment, silence again. He stared at me like I had spoken a language he couldn't understand. Then he shoved the door open and got out, leaving me alone in the car. Inside the house, the evening unfolded with a stiffness I couldn't ignore. He retreated to his office, shutting the door with a decisive click. I wandered into the kitchen, sat at the table, and let the weight of the day settle over me. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone. I thought of calling a friend, but I hadn't shared much of my family life with anyone. To outsiders, my father was charming, respected, the kind of man who smiled wide at neighbors and paid his bills on time. Who would believe me if I told them the truth? Instead, I scrolled to the banker's card he had slipped me once before during a routine visit with my father. I hadn't paid much attention then, but now the neat black letters on the cream paper felt like a rope thrown into deep water. I dialed. He answered on the second ring, his tone calm but professional. "This is Mark Reynolds." My breath caught. "It's Sarah," I said softly, almost ashamed of how small my voice sounded. A pause. Then his tone shifted, warmer. "I'm glad you called. Are you safe right now?" The question startled me. No one had ever asked me that so directly. I swallowed hard. "I'm at home. My dad's here, but he's in his office." Mark didn't rush me. He let the silence hold until I found my words. "I'm scared," I admitted. "That's natural," he said gently. "But you did the right thing today. You made your voice heard, even if it was quiet." Tears pricked my eyes. It had been so long since anyone validated me, since anyone saw past the facade my father so carefully crafted. We spoke for only a few minutes, but those minutes cracked open something inside me. He explained that my note was taken seriously, that he had already flagged the documents for review, and that nothing could move forward without my explicit consent. "You're not powerless," Mark said firmly. "Remember that." After I hung up, I sat in the dim kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. My father's shadow passed once across the hall, but he didn't come in. Maybe he thought I was sulking. Maybe he thought silence meant surrender. But he was wrong. That night, lying awake in my room, I let the memories surface. The times he'd belittled my mother's decisions, the way he'd made me feel like a child no matter how old I got, the subtle ways he twisted trust into control. And I realized the truth. He wasn't protecting me. He was protecting himself. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. He sat at the kitchen table with his newspaper, coffee steaming in his favorite mug, the picture of normalcy. When I walked in, he smiled, too wide, too quick. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said as though yesterday had been erased. But I saw it now, clearer than ever. The cracks. The strain. The desperation under his practiced charm. I poured myself a cup of coffee, my hands steady for once. "Morning," I replied evenly. He studied me over the edge of his paper. "I've been thinking. We should reschedule with the bank sooner rather than later. Best not to drag things out." I met his gaze, my heart thudding but steady. "I'll decide when I'm ready." His smile froze again, the mask slipping just enough to show the storm beneath. But this time, I didn't look away. The truth had broken through. Not with shouting, not with dramatic confrontations, but with small cracks, quiet words, and one simple note written in shaky handwriting. And once it was out there, once it had been seen and heard, there was no putting it back. For the first time in years, I felt the faint, fragile taste of freedom. And I knew, deep down, that he felt it too. That morning I moved with a purpose I hadn't allowed myself before. I made coffee, not for comfort but to steady my hands. I called Mark and asked for a follow-up meeting that same day. He agreed without hesitation and said he would ensure nothing progressed without my express written consent. When we walked into the bank, the lobby felt the same, but I did not. I watched my father's shoulders, how his confidence tried to fill the space. Mark met us at the entrance and led us back to the side office. He had a calm, businesslike manner that did not wink or look away. He set a fresh stack of documents on the desk and spoke plainly about procedure. Notarization, witness signatures, verification of any power of attorney. My father produced a folded paper and set it down with a flourish. He said it was a power of attorney signed by my mother. The gesture was theatrical, meant to end the conversation. I felt the old rush of panic, but instead of melting, I leaned in. The signature looked familiar, but something about the way it flowed seemed different. Mark examined the document under the lamp. He did not accept it. He pointed out missing seals and asked permission to forward the paper to legal for verification. When my father's face flushed, he pushed harder, angry and loud. He tried to snatch the documents back as if possession could silence our questions. I surprised myself by speaking up. I told Mark I had handled my mother's mail and bills for months. I described the way she signed prescriptions, how she tightened a loop on her last name. My words were deliberate. They were proof, not feeling. Mark listened and then called compliance into the room. A quiet woman in a sharp blazer stepped forward and confirmed banks could not process transfers with contested or unclear authority. My father's voice shook with rage. He stormed out, letting the door slam in a way that made the glass rattle. The echo felt final. Mark closed the folder and offered me a small, practical list of next steps, legal referrals, securing originals, and what to do if I felt threatened. He also suggested a safe deposit box at the bank. It felt strange to plan safeguards where the fight had begun, but it was sensible. At home I packed a small box with my mother's things, an old recipe card with flour smudges, a watch that had stopped the week before she died, and the photograph of us at the county fair. I slid the picture into the box as if that could keep her near. Then I called the attorney Mark had recommended. The woman on the phone listened and then said plainly, "Change the locks. Don't sign anything with him present. Document everything." Her directness was a kind of permission. For years I had waited for approval from others. Now I heard someone telling me to act. I called a locksmith who came that afternoon. He changed the locks without ceremony and handed me a set of new keys, saying simply, "You did the right thing." My father noticed the change and reacted with fury. He pounded on the door and yelled about betrayal and selfishness. I watched from the window as heat rose from his face. He left in a storm of words and slammed the gate behind him. I didn't feel victorious. I felt something quieter, a fragile certainty that I would not be walked over again. The bank kept everything on hold. Mark called with updates and never promised more than he could deliver. When the legal department examined the paper my father had produced, they found anomalies. A missing notary stamp, a date that didn't match records. The document would need verification. Suddenly the fight had moved from my small kitchen table to a formal review that required proof, not persuasion. Neighbors started to notice. Mrs. Keller from next door dropped off a casserole and asked how I was doing. "You look like you finally stood up," she said, as if that small observation could anchor me. She told me, in the soft way older women do. About time she had taken small steps that turned into large changes. Her ordinary kindness felt like a salve. I took practical steps that felt decisive. I booked the attorney's appointment and scheduled a date to open the safe deposit box. I made a list of what to keep there: the insurance policy, my mother's will, any originals connected to the home. Each item I moved into a secure place felt like putting a brick into a new foundation. There were nights when doubt returned. Old habits are like trained reflexes. When confronted with pressure, I still wanted to apologize and give in. But the more I acted, the less those reflexes ruled me. I learned to answer the phone on my terms. I wrote down conversations and saved emails. Documentation felt less like paperwork and more like protection. Then one day my father brought a man to our door who claimed to be a notary. He said we could finalize everything quickly, right there on the kitchen table. My stomach flipped at the thought of him forcing a signature in my own home. I felt the old panic rise, the urge to make it stop by doing what he wanted. Mrs. Keller had been out watering her plants and saw them at the gate. She crossed the yard and stood there, steady. "I don't like being the sort of neighbor who lets people bully my friends," she said plainly. She offered to be a witness and sign any statement confirming I was making my own choices. Her presence shifted the room. The so-called notary became flustered when asked for identification and paperwork. My father's man left in a rush, muttering, and they both went down the drive together. That small moment of community support meant more than I expected. It showed me that I did not need to carry everything privately. People who knew me, really knew me, saw the truth when it happened. Their recognition became part of my defense, and I grasped how ordinary acts could be powerful. A week later, the bank sent a letter confirming a freeze on any transfers until legal verification was complete. That official notice steadied me in a way a conversation could not. It turned the issue into paperwork and procedures, not a private contest of wills. There would be forms to fill and meetings to attend, but it would happen under rules, not at my father's dictate. As things settled into process, I found small freedoms emerging. I walked to the little park where my mother had loved to sit and read. I planted a small packet of seeds in the community garden she had tended. The act was symbolic but fierce. Life could take root again under my hands. Walking out free was not a single dramatic moment. It was a series of choices: locking a door, calling an attorney, accepting a neighbor's help, putting documents in a safe deposit box. Each step was practical and ordinary, but together they formed a new life. That afternoon, with copies of the bank paperwork in my bag and new keys in my pocket, I waved to the neighbor who had once waved at me and looked back at the house. I did not feel triumphant in a loud way. I felt light, cautious, and hopeful. I had not only stopped someone from taking what was mine, I had started to build something that belonged to me. I was ready to live my own life.